There is a very specific, and I think very painful frustration that comes with trying to learn a new language when you're an adult.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that the grammar is hard or, the pronunciations are weird. It's the gap.
The gap, yeah.
You can spend months on Duolingo. You buy the expensive textbooks. You do the flashcards until your eyes are just burning. And in your head, you're so eloquent, you're basically Shakespeare.
And then you walk into a coffee shop to just order a latte, or you get on a Zoom call and nothing. You freeze.
Completely. You sound like a toddler. The words are all locked in your brain, but they absolutely refuse to come out of your mouth.
It's like a disconnect between the hard drive and the speakers.
Exactly.
Cognitive scientists actually call this the input-output gap.
Right.
And it's the classic trap of adult learning. We treat language like it's an academic subject.
Like history or math.
Right.
Yeah.
Where if you just study the data enough, you'll pass the test. But a conversation isn't a test. It's more like a performance sport. It's
Wow.
closer to dance than it is to data entry.
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're looking at a method that basically argues you should burn the textbooks.
Metaphorically, we hope.
Metaphorically, yes.
Right.
And replace them with Netflix, a diary, and some slightly creepy behavior in your living room.
We're doing a deep dive into the philosophy of Alina Reis. And just for context, Alina isn't a PhD linguist. She doesn't have a wall full of Cambridge certifications.
Yeah.
She's a content creator. Doesn't have a wall full of Cambridge certifications.
Yeah.
She's a content creator, but you could argue she's more effective because of that. She's someone who, hacked her own way from being terrified of speaking to being this really fluent, confident communicator.
And that's why we're covering this. We're not interested in the theory of syntax today.
Yeah.
We're interested in the mechanics of how do you actually get the words out.
Mm.
Her whole idea is that fluency isn't a study habit.
Mm.
It's a lifestyle shift.
Right. So if you're setting aside 1 hour a day to learn English, Alina would probably say you've already lost.
You've already failed.
It has to be integrated into the other, 15 hours you're awake. It's about volume, but not the kind of volume you get from a book.
So let's start with the mindset, because she tells this story about her school days that I think frames this perfectly. The story of a classmate named Shay.
The Shay principle. It's so fascinating because we all knew a Shay in school. Or, if we're being honest, maybe we were the opposite of Shay.
Oh, I was definitely the opposite.
Alina talks about how in her class there was this huge pressure to be the dictionary. You had to use the biggest, most complicated words to prove you were smart.
Which is how the education system rewards us, right?
Yeah.
Big words get you big grades. If I write the protagonist was sad, that's a C. If I write the protagonist was despondent and melancholic, suddenly I get an A.
Exactly. We're trained to perform complexity. But Alina noticed something odd. She's obsessing over these 4-syllable words, trying to sound really sophisticated. But then there was this girl, Shay, who spoke very simply. Just basic vocabulary, short sentences. And yet when Shay spoke, everyone listened.
And when Alina spoke, trying to use her fancy words,
people just looked confused or bored.
that's such a painful realization for a high achiever. You're doing more work, but you're getting less of a connection.
It led her to make this distinction between two very different skills, having a command over English versus having a command over communication.
And I think most people, myself included, we just assume those are the same thing. If I know English well, then I must communicate well.
But they're surprisingly different. Command over English is technical. It's knowing that obfuscate is a synonym for confuse, or knowing the pluperfect tense.
Right.
Command over communication is relational. It's knowing that if you actually say obfuscate to a normal person, you've completely failed to connect. You've just prioritized your own ego over the message.
Because the goal isn't to impress.
The goal is to express. She
Wow.
calls this the shift from impress versus express. If you are trying to impress, you're focused on yourself. How do I look? How smart do I sound? But if you're trying to express, you're focused on the other person. Do they understand what I'm saying?
It's almost like a form of hospitality. You're making it easy for the listener.
Precisely. She argues that you should actively choose the least fashionable words. If you have a choice between a complex word and a simple one, and they both get the job done, the simple one is actually the deeper skill.
That's a huge relief for learners, though. It means you don't need a 10,000-word vocabulary to be considered good.
You just need the right 500 words and the confidence to actually use them.
Okay, but how do you build that confidence? Because Alina's method for studying is, well,
Yeah.
It's basically what I do on a lazy Sunday.
Right.
She just watches TV.
The Netflix method. Now, before everyone cancels their language tutor and buys a subscription, we should probably clarify this.
Yeah.
She isn't just watching TV in the way you or I might binge a show to just zone out.
Right. She throws out the stat that something like 50% of her speaking style comes from American shows. That seems incredibly high for just sitting on a couch.
It's high because of how she watches. Most of us watch passively. We're following the plot. We want to know who the killer is. Alina engages in active observation. She's not just listening to the words, she's watching the physical performance of the language.
What does that mean practically? Is she, like, pausing the show and taking notes?
Sometimes, but it's more about her attention. She's watching their eye movements, she's watching their hand gestures, she's noticing when they pause, the volume they use.
So she's studying the actors, not just the script.
She treats the actors as data points. You see, language is physical. It has a rhythm, a cadence. If you learn English from a textbook, you learn the text, but you don't learn the music.
And you end up sounding robotic.
Or like a news anchor from the 1950s. By watching Friends or Suits with this kind of intensity, she's downloading the culture of the language, the shrugs, the timing, the sarcasm.
That's interesting. It reminds me of how babies learn. They don't study grammar books. They just stare at their parents' faces and mimic absolutely everything.
Exactly. It's biological. She's triggering those mirror neurons. And she combines this with a pretty controversial take on reading. She admits she actually hates books.
Which, again, for someone teaching language skills, that is a bold confession. I don't like reading.
But she reads anyway. She forces herself. And why? Because she views authors as the owners of the language. They're the masters she needs to learn from. But her approach to vocabulary, what she calls the dictionary trap, is where she really flips the script.
This was the part that surprised me the most. Because I'm so guilty of this. I'll read a page in another language, I'll circle every word I don't know, look them all up, and try to memorize them.
And how many do you remember a week later? Be honest.
Maybe 2, if I'm lucky, on a good day.
And how does that make you feel?
Like a failure. Like my brain is broken or I'm just bad at languages.
Alina says that is not a failure. That is a filter. She says if you look up 100 words over 3 months and you only remember 8 or 10 of them, that is a success.
How is a 10% retention rate a success? In any other field, that's an F-.
Because language follows, like a Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And in language, it's actually closer to 955. You don't need all the words. You only need the words that are relevant to you.
Huh.
The brain is efficient. It throws out the noise. If you looked up a word and forgot it 3 days later, your brain basically just decided, I don't need this to survive or connect.
So the 90 words I forgot were just clutter.
Exactly. The 10 words that stuck. They stuck because they had some kind of emotional resonance or utility for you. Maybe you needed that word to describe your job or a feeling you have often. She says, let your brain do the filtering. Don't force feed yourself the dictionary.
That is incredibly liberating. It stops that whole guilt cycle. It turns forgetting into a feature, not a bug.
It does, but, and here's the warning label, because I don't want to make this sound effortless. She doesn't let you off the hook entirely. The input part can be relaxed, like watching Netflix or letting words filter in. But the output, that requires sweat.
She uses the bodybuilding analogy.
The gym. You cannot build muscle by watching YouTube videos of other people lifting weights. You can watch Arnold Schwarzenegger pump iron all day, but your biceps aren't going to grow.
Even if you watch him really actively and notice his eye movements.
Right. At some point, you have to move the iron. And for language, moving the iron is speaking. And this is where the lifestyle approach gets really hard. She says you have to speak every single day. No exceptions.
And this brings us to the biggest barrier. It's not vocabulary. It's not grammar. It's the fear of looking stupid.
Public speaking anxiety, it's primal. We are wired to fear rejection from the tribe. And when you speak a new language, you are voluntarily making yourself vulnerable to that rejection. You're stripping away your intelligence and sounding like a child. It feels deeply unsafe.
Alina shares a pretty raw experience with this. She talks about practicing with her friends, her actual social circle, and they laughed at her. They mocked her mistakes.
That's the moment most people would just quit. When the people you trust, the ones who are supposed to support you, make you feel small for trying to grow. That hurts. That triggers a deep sense of shame.
But her reaction to this,
Yeah.
I want to print this out and frame it. She didn't stop. She didn't go home and cry. She just reframed the entire interaction.
She did. She said, if somebody is laughing at you, the fault is not in you. The fault is in their character.
That is such a power move.
And it's a psychological shield.
Sure.
She's separating her performance from her worth. If I make a grammar mistake, that's just a data point about my skill level. It is not a statement about my value as a human.
Right.
But if you laugh at me for trying to improve, that is a statement about your insecurity.
I'm building a skill. You're just building a wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she points out the long-term reality. If you keep speaking through the mockery, you eventually get fluent. The mockers, they usually stay exactly where they are. Consistency beats cynicism every single time.
But let's say you're not ready for that battle yet. You're too shy, or you literally have no one to speak English with. Maybe you live in a non-English speaking country. Alina has a workaround, but she warns us. It's a little creepy.
The creepy habit, talking to yourself.
And not just, mumbling under your breath while you're doing the dishes. She talks about shouting in an empty room.
Loudly. And honestly, as strange as that sounds, this is one of the most sound strategies from a cognitive load perspective.
Oh, so why does the volume matter?
Well, think about a real conversation. You have to listen, decode what they said, formulate an answer, check your grammar, check your social standing, and speak all in milliseconds. That is a massive cognitive load.
It's like juggling while riding a unicycle.
It is. When you talk to yourself, you remove all the social pressure. You remove the listening component. You free up all this brain power to focus entirely on the mechanics of speaking.
So it's a laboratory, a safe space.
It's a rehearsal. By speaking loudly, she's training her mouth muscles. She's getting used to the sound of her own voice in English. A lot of people are actually surprised by their own voice when they switch languages. It sounds foreign.
Yeah.
She says sometimes she has to look around to make sure the neighbors aren't watching because she gets so into it.
I love that image. Just having a full-on debate with yourself in the living room. But it makes sense. If you can't speak fluently when you're alone in your room, how on earth do you expect to do it in a high-stakes board meeting?
You can't. And she bridges this solo practice with writing. She keeps a diary.
Now, journaling in a second language can feel like a chore. I've tried it, and I usually give up after, like, "Dear diary, today I ate a sandwich." What's the benefit over just speaking to yourself?
Time. Writing is just speaking in slow motion. When you're talking to yourself, you can't really pause for 5 minutes to find the perfect synonym for happy. You just have to keep going to maintain the flow. But in a diary, you can.
So that's where you use the tools?
Right. She says that's when she uses the thesaurus or the dictionary. She's writing about her day. She gets stuck. She looks up the word right then. And because she has a context, her own life, that word is so much more likely to stick.
So it feeds back into the loop. The writing polishes the vocabulary, which you then use in the self-talk, which you then take out into the real world.
It's a whole ecosystem. Observation from Netflix for input, the diary for refinement, self-talk for muscle memory, and then real conversation for the final test.
But there's one final piece to this puzzle, and it's about expectations. I think a lot of people quit because they don't see progress fast enough. They want to sound like a native speaker in, 3 months?
Alina drops a big reality check here. She calls it the 10-20% rule. She noticed that she didn't need to be perfect to get positive feedback.
She says people started complimenting her, "Hey, your English is really good," when she knew she was nowhere near perfect.
She quantified it. She said when she improved just 10% or 20% from her baseline, the world noticed. The bar for good communication is actually way lower than we think it is.
You don't need to be Shakespeare.
You just need to be clear.
And she admits that she was kind of laughing inside when people complimented her.
Because she knew the truth. She knew she was still making tons of mistakes. She knew her grammar was shaky. But she used that external validation as fuel to keep going. And it's this paradox she ends on. If she is good, she will not be easy. And if she is easy, she won't be good.
That's a heavy quote, she being the language.
Or just the journey of mastery itself. She's saying that the struggle is what gives the skill its value. If you could just take a pill and be fluent in English instantly, it wouldn't mean anything. The fact that you have to fight through the mockery, the confusion, the creepy self-talk, that is what builds your character, not just your vocabulary.
So if you're struggling, that's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign you're doing it right.
The struggle is the feature, not the bug. It means you're engaging with something difficult enough to actually change you.
And I think that's the message to take away. Whether you're learning English or coding or how to cook, the academic approach, just memorize the rules and hope for the best, it rarely works. You have to live it.
You have to move from studying to lifestyle. Be like, focus on connection, not on showing off. Watch your shows, but watch them like a detective. And, don't be afraid to talk to yourself.
Speaking of watching like a detective, I want to throw a challenge out to our listeners based on Alina's observation method.
Okay, what's the challenge?
Next time you are watching a TED Talk or a movie or even just listening to this, don't just listen to the words. I want you to try and mimic the silence,
The silence.
the pauses.
Yeah.
Alina talks about observing the rhythm. Confident speakers are not afraid of silence. They own it. Nervous speakers rush to fill every single gap with or just noise.
That is profound. We usually think fluency is about speed. How fast can I talk? But maybe real fluency is about control, about knowing when not to speak.
It's about the space between the words. Try to copy that and just see how it changes your confidence.
That's a great experiment. It shifts the focus from what do I say to how do I be?
That's a wrap for this deep dive. Go find your inner Shay, ignore the haters, and maybe start talking to yourself. I'll catch you in the next one.
Keep talking.